Okay, welcome to Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is on loops and doing file input and output. Okay, so on page 189 is where the chapter starts. And they start off talking about the increment and decrement operators, which has nothing to do with files and loops, but hey, I'll cut them some slack. Okay, so file, new project. I'm going to call this one Chapter 4. These aren't very imaginative names, are they? Chapter 4. So remember how we had before, we had a scenario where we could go in here and we could say, we could have, int x, and then we could say x is equal to x plus 1. And then we found out a cool way you can do that is where you go in here and you say the plus equals 1. Okay, I guess I should go ahead and give that a value so it won't complain. So that incremented it by 1. That incremented it by 1. Well, there's a third one, and that is x plus plus. Okay, so they all basically do the same thing. Now, you might think, why is there 3 of them? Well, the plus plus thing only does increment by 1. The other two, I can increment by any number. I can increment by 10, right? Any number. But when it comes to plus plus, it's just that. So there's a prefix version and a postfix version. Okay? So let me explain what all that means. I'm gonna comment this part out and say, what is system.out println, and then I'm gonna say x plus plus. I probably should have commented this guy out as well. Sorry. Okay, so I'm starting out with the value of 12. And so is this going to be 12 or is this going to be 13? Well, the way it works is after the value has been pulled from x, then it does the increment thing or decrement thing. So this is going to be 12. Now, if I turn right around and asked it a second time, so let me just run this. So plus plus x means I want it to happen before. It's all about when do you want it to happen. If I ask you, what is your value? The answer depends on where the plus plus is. If it's before, I want you to add before you give me the answer. If it's at the end, I want you to give me the answer and then do the add. It's just a matter of the order. So it came out 12. Gee, what a surprise. But if I turn right around and ask for it a second time, dang, I can't type today. And just x, no plus plus. I don't want to make things more complicated. All right, so what's the second one going to be? Well, the second one's going to be 13. Because the first one said, you want my value first, and then I'll increment. And the second one would just give me what the current value is. The current value is 13. Cool? All right. Obviously, you could switch that around and play with it if you want. Okay, on page 193, they finally start talking about loops, which is what this chapter is supposed to be about. So here's an example of a while loop. Now, there's 3 parts to a while loop. One is you have to have what's called a loop control variable. In fact, I often use an acronym calling it the LCV, the loop control variable. So I set the loop control variable equal to something, and then I test. This is a Boolean expression. Remember what Boolean expressions are? Those same thing we had in the if statement, where the Boolean expression, all it does is resolve to yes or no or true or false. It doesn't know anything else, okay? Which pretty much means that you're going to have one of those comparison operators in here. So while number is less than or equal to 5, and then it does something, and you're going to have to remember to add this little increment, this update thing. Okay, so I set the initial value, I test the value to see if I'm going to do something, I do something, and then the third part is I update the loop control variable. So set the loop control variable, test the loop control variable, update the loop control variable. If you miss any one of these, it's not going to work. Okay. So what happens if the first number you put in doesn't meet the condition? So I'm going to do that. So let's go down to here, and I'm going to say, so if x is less than 10, I'm sorry, not if, while x is less than 10, and then I'm going to say system.out println hello, and then in here I'm going to say x minus minus. Okay, that looks like a decent loop to me. While x is less than 10. Let's do plus plus, who cares? Doesn't really matter. Okay, so how many times are we going to see the word hello? Well, let's check it out. Let's see how many times we see the word hello. None. What happened? Did I do something wrong? No. It's just the value of x is a 13. So if the beginning test is not met, then the loop does not work at all. Okay? That kind of makes sense? So this is what's called a pre-test loop. In other words, the testing happens before the loop starts. So it is possible that it will not run at all. It is possible. Cool? So kind of remember that, because later on we're going to be talking about a different style of this, which is a post-test loop. Okay? So on page 204 is that exact thing, the do-while loop. It is a post-test loop, where you're pretty much guaranteed that it's going to run at least once. So I'm going to convert this to a do-while. All right, so I'm going to basically do the exact same thing. I'm going to say do, and then I'll say system out println, I don't know, hello 2, just so you could tell them apart. Then x plus plus. And then when I get down to here, this part's a little weird. This is where I put the while statement. Okay, while x is less than 10, and then semicolon. Ooh, now that's a very unusual place for a semicolon, at least in my opinion. Up here, we didn't have any semicolons at all, so the normal while loop doesn't need a semicolon. But the do while does need a semicolon at the end, which is kind of weird. So all I did was just, basically you just take the tops and bottoms and move them around. Boink. Okay, so the value of x is still 13. Okay, right? So let's run this. And I got one of the hello 2s, okay? Because that's the difference between a pre-test loop and a post-test loop. Pre-test means, man, you may not get anything at all. A post-test loop says it's going to run one time for sure, and maybe more times afterwards, okay? That's the whole idea. And watch out for the semicolon, because that's a very easy thing to miss. It's in an unusual place. Nothing else is like it in the entire language, and so I'm just telling you, you're likely to forget that. Okay. On page 207, they talk about a third type called a for loop. And a for loop is one of those things where all the three parts, the initialization part, the testing part, and the update part, all appear on one line. Now, this is actually pretty good, because having things right now, I mean, right this very second, if you look at the screen now, what is the value of x? The initial value of x that's going to occur on line 37. Well, you can't see it because it's off the screen. Well, that's not very good for loops, is it? I mean, the computer doesn't. Trust me, the computer does not care. We're talking about the humans now. When the human wants to look at this, wouldn't it be nice if all three parts just so happen to be right there in your face, all on the same line, easy to see? So let's convert this one more time. I'm going to say for. And then I have my loop control variable guy. I'm going to go ahead and start over with another loop control variable rather than just use the same one over and over again. So I'm going to say int, counter is equal to 0. That's my beginning one. And then I say where counter is less than 10. And then I want to take the counter and increment him. And then I say system.out.println, and I'm going to say hello from line, and then have it just throw what the value of the counter is out there. Okay. So this is syntactically very similar to this guy up here. It really is. It's just that all three parts are easy to see. I can see the initialization of the loop control variable. I can see the test of the loop control variable, and I can see the update of the loop control variable. Let's run this. And so I got 0 through 9. Okay, now hang on a second. If I wanted something to run 10 times, so I told you, make this thing run 10 times, and you didn't really care about what the loop control variable was. It was just one like I did, where I just made it up. By the way, look at the scope of the word counter, of the variable counter. Because it's being done inside the for loop, its scope is just between here and here. Nobody else knows anything about it. Okay? That makes sense? Remember scope? Of course you do. All right. So the point is, if I wanted to run it 10 times, I would start at 0. 0 is the way we always start counting in programming languages. Start at counting at 0 and go less than 10. Less than 10 would be 0 to 9, right? Which is 10 items. Okay. So I'm just saying it's very common to have this guy be a less than. Now, let's make this guy count backwards in the exact same way. Okay? Count backwards. All right, here we go. So this time I'm going to say for int, how about LCV for loop control variable? And I want to start at 9, remember, because I want it to be exactly the same as what we had before. Semicolon, LCV. Now this is going to be a little weird. Greater than or equal to 0, then LCV minus minus. Okay? Now, why did I do the greater than or equal to? Because I'm starting at 9 and I want to go through 0, not stop at 1, but go through 0. So I'm just going to copy this because I'm lazy. I'll probably have to change. Well, it's okay. So I'm going to call this one hello 2 from line. All right, here we go. And we should get 10 of them, but they're in backwards order. Yikes, what did I do wrong? Oh, it's not counter anymore. It's LCV. Okay, I'm sure it'll be more happy now. Okay, so the first batch went, 0 through 9, and the second batch went 9 through 0. Hooray! All right, so the difference is when you're counting down, typically you use greater than or equal to in the test. When you're counting up, you can just use plain old less than. Okay? Both of these loop run exactly 10 times. Okay? Good. Now, notice that there's semicolons inside the parentheses, which is kind of strange. I mean, once again, that there's only a few scenarios in Java where the semicolon is going to be inside the parentheses to separate these guys. Personally, I would have preferred something like commas, but hey, because it makes it look like, well, it does. It makes it look like this is a statement, and that is the while loop, and that is another statement. It kind of looks like statements. Okay? Kind of sort of makes sense. Okay. So, let's talk about when you should use each one, because that's kind of important. So this works really, really well when you already know in advance, you already know exactly how many times this thing's going to run. In other words, you're not saying, well, like, how many students in the class? You type in 30, and then from then on, it can calculate, 0 through 29 with no trouble at all. But if you didn't know in advance, well, there's something else you probably need to do. Okay, so we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so you know how this works.